all this tells us is that there's a difference between those four conditions. So all that tells us is that these different perspectives that the participants were told to take resulted in unequal wise reasoning scores. That somewhere there was a difference, but it doesn't tell us, because we have more than two groups, it doesn't tell us what those differences are. We can look at these means and see that this is a negative 0.55. So that means that and this is a positive value. These are all positive values, suggesting that this self-immersed is the lowest wise reasoning scores. And then here, other distance would be the highest. Now, we want to know, are these really different from each other? So what we do is, that's why we do a post-hoc test. Now, it's important to note that if this value in your ANOVA table, the significance, this p-value, is not less than 0.05, you don't look at your post-hoc values. So I just have you run it with the analysis. Technically, you should probably wait and run it after you see if it's significant. But we ran it when we did the analysis, if you followed my instructions in the video. And then this popped out, see, it says here, Post-Hoc Tests. We ran a Tukey HSD. There are a variety of different tests that you can run. I just chose the Tukey HSD. I think it's the most appropriate here. It's definitely the most common post-hoc test that's done. And again, think of it like you could do a t-test between self-immersed, self-distance, self-immersed, other distance, but that would increase that error. Every time you do a t-test, you are getting a certain amount of type 1 and type 2 error. So we do the overall ANOVA to get rid of that error, and then we do a Tukey's test, or a specific post-hoc test, to reduce that error. They have, within the calculations, they have ways to reduce that experiment-wise error. So we did a Tukey HSD, and then what this table shows us, we have, let's call this row 1, row 2, row 3, and row 4. Obviously within the rows there's sub-rows, and then here we have we'll just call this column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, and 5. Okay, so column 1 being the mean difference. Now you're not going to report the mean. You could, but we're not going to report the mean difference. What I want you to report is the mean and the descriptives. Okay, this mean and this standard deviation. The mean difference and standard error in the post-hoc test is not what you report. Again, say that again. When you're reporting, when you're making your graphs, tables, whatever I ask you to report, you're doing it from the descriptives output, the actual mean for that group condition, and the standard deviation or standard error that goes along with it. Okay, so let's take a look at this first. Here we have a comparison of the self-immersed condition with self-distanced. And we can see that self-immersed is this much lower, which again, we're just gonna ignore this column really. And we're gonna go over here to significance. So between the self-immersed and self-distance condition, the significance, or the p-value, is 0.037. Now, is this less than 0.05? Well, yeah, the 3 is less than a 5. So this is significant, or they are unequal. They're proven different with the statistical analysis. If we compare the self-immersed to the other immersed, 0.009, this is 0.5. Yes, the 0 is less than 5, so this is again significant. If we compare self-immersed to other distanced, again, 0.003. So if we come here, self-immersed to other distance, we come across 0.003. That again is less than 0.05. So all three of these are significantly less than 0.05. So self-immersed is unequal to all three of the other conditions. And remember, we said self-immersed was the lowest. It was a negative number, and all three of these were positive numbers. Now, we might need to go and look at some of these other conditions. So like, say, does self-distance different from the other ones? Self-immersed we already looked at, but what about self-distance and other immersed, or self-distance and other distance? If we look here, 0.991, definitely greater than 0.05, right? We're just looking here at this first number, this 9, much bigger than a 0. Same thing with the 0.851. So there's no difference there. These numbers, so self-distance is equal, even though it's not exactly equal. It's not different enough to be considered unequal. So self-distance, other immersed, and other distance, there's no difference there. If we look at other immersed, we already know that it's different from self-immersed, but how about the other two conditions? If we look over here, we see they're higher, same thing with other distanced. Comparing to the other groups, no difference. So all we really need to discuss is this self-immersed comparison to the other three conditions. So we need to write that up. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we talk about our post-hoc test. So we're doing what's called pairwise comparison. So that's one thing you could write is pairwise comparisons. Or maybe we want to say pairwise comparisons of the means, to be more specific, right? Of the means, either way. Using, and we want to mention the post-hoc test. Here we're using the Tukey. But remember, you might, we're going to do it within subjects lab, so you might use a different one. So just keep in mind, you're doing the same thing, just putting in different things. It might be a different post-hoc test. And it revealed, even though this is a little bit of anthropomorphism, we'll just go with it, revealed significant differences, or maybe unequal differences between self-immersed and the other conditions. And then we're talking about this, so it's p less than 0.05. Now this really isn't enough. So this is just kind of an overall summary, right? So you could word it in different ways. Maybe, depending on what your outcome is, this might be too general of a statement. You have to describe what happened. So we just have to have one condition significant from all three here. So now what we want to go on is talk about more specifically, right? So more specifically, and you could also word this in other ways as well. For example, or something like that. In the self-immersed condition, and here's where we're going to put in our means. And if we go back to that descriptives table, we can look here. Oh, we have to go all the way back up here, sorry. We go up here for the means, again, that descriptives table, and we look here, it's a negative 0.55. Equals negative 0.0. You don't have to put in the 0 anymore. It's not necessarily required, but I'm stuck in my old ways. If I went back to that table, I'm going to actually put in the standard deviation for now instead of standard error. I'm going to round that up to 1.17. It was 1.66. And again, I want to put these in italics. So in the self-immersed condition, the wise reasoning scores, because that's what we're comparing, that was my dependent variable, were significantly lower than the scores in the and here again I'm going to present my means. I'm going to let you find those means and whatnot in there. So the mean for that, some sort of value, right? And the SD. Put in the value from the table, and here's where I want to present that p-value, and we have a specific p, and it was, so that's the first p-value that I'm going to present, close parentheses. So see how I have this all in parentheses? I have this italicized. Again, remember in the X's, you're going to go to that table and you're going to find those values. And then we also have, wasn't just the self-distance, right? We had all three conditions. The other immersed, again, you're going to put, I'm not going to do any of that here. You're going to put all that same information in. Your mean for the other immersed condition, the SD for the other immersed condition, and the p-value for the other immersed condition, and the other distance condition. Same thing, you're going to put in the mean, the SD, and the p-value for that condition. Again, going back to this table, you can find the other immersed, the mean, and the standard deviation, other distance, the mean, the standard deviation, and for that p-value, you come down here to the comparisons, right? Self-immersed, other immersed, p-value. Self-immersed, other distance, p-value. So those are the values that you're going to put in. And then maybe you have to go on, if it's a different analysis, maybe you have to go on and you have to discuss differences between some of the other conditions. But for this one, there were no other significant difference found between the other conditions. And here we're going to go ahead and just put a general p is greater than 0.05. That's kind of our general p-value. And you are also going to present a table and a figure, just a figure here. So normally you wouldn't put the means and the standard deviations in both a figure and the text, but I want you to have practice making that bar graph in APA style. So, and you also want to reference it here. So one way you could do that is the means and standard deviation. You could do that, or you could write it that way, or you could go in here, you could put C figure 1. That would be another way to do it. And so there's a variety of different ways. So I've given you some suggestions on ways to write this up. The other thing we need to do is we need to make sure it's double spaced. So we go in here, get rid of this, any spacing because it's not correct. You only want one space in between everything. So you'll make sure that this is only one space here, there's nothing else. We want to go up and we want to have a header. Actually, let's do our page number. That's the easiest way to do it. So we have our page number. Probably isn't going to be 1, but we're going to get a header. Let's do our header. Remember, all in all caps. Wise reasoning. And then we'll tab over. And we want to set this header to be 1 inch. We did that for our title page already. Like I said, there's a space here, but sometimes if there's not a space, you want to just add that little space. It looks like there's a space here, so we're good. We don't need to do that. And then sometimes you might have other things to describe in your results. This is just a quick, short little introduction to writing the results section. Again, I don't want it to be exactly the way I've written it up here. The numbers will be the same because we've all done the same calculations. I'm just giving you an idea of how to do this, and hopefully that will help.